Today we are very privileged to have with us a gentleman from Sacramento area, Mr. James Feeney. Mr. Feeney spent most of his price system career as an electronics technician, and you probably would remember him during the 1960s. He orchestrated the revival of the TechNet ham radio group. Mr. Feeney today is going to introduce to us a model of the American free enterprise economy that will hopefully stimulate your thinking and give you a new perspective maybe on the situation that you find yourself in. And without further ado, I'll present to you Mr. James Feeney. Now,
Okay. Well, good afternoon or good evening. I'd like to, it's the stupid economy is the title of this talk. Now, you had a talk here recently, I understand, with a slightly different title, but using the same words. So the first thing I should do here is explain this title and its origin. Just a little review. In the last presidential election campaign, the Clinton people criticized the incumbent Bush for running off all over the world, pushing his New World Order, instead of attending to affairs here in the United States. And thus they said, well, we're just going to coin this bumper sticker here, and attack him and say, it's the economy, stupid. And so their criticism had the ring of truth, considering the long list of ailments that was afflicting the economy. And the president's duty, they claimed, was to do something about these illnesses. And that a new man in the White House was needed to, in quotes, fix the economy. But is there anything wrong with it? It is my contention here that there is nothing at all wrong, and that what we see all around us is normal and natural. I hope to show that a more accurate epithet to throw is, it's the stupid economy. Okay, let's take a look at this, a list of these so-called problems. There's the national debt, also the state, city, county, and private debt. There's crime, welfare, health care, unemployment, transportation, and of course the oil supplies that go along with that, pollution of all kinds, homelessness, oh, we hear a lot about that, and militarism without an enemy, oh my gosh, and inflation, well, lack of it at the present time. All of these problems, all competing for our headlines every day. All these and many more, from pregnant teenagers to huge amounts of guns in our society. They're actually all part and parcel of a social system that has outlived its usefulness and now threatens our very survival. So let's take a hard look at this hydra-headed monster we have created called the economy. Now, along with others, we have taken to calling the present social system the price system and describe it with the following definition. A price system, any social system that affects its distribution of goods and services by means of a system of trade based on commodity valuation and employing any form of debt tokens or money. This constitutes a price system. Now, that definition may seem a little heavy, but a key word in it is valuation. This valuation of commodities and services is based on a condition that has existed throughout recorded history. That condition has been scarcity. We all know this through our use of the expression that we use all the time. We call it dirt cheap. That's the basis of our use of the word scarcity. And also on the other end of the scale, how could anyone charge money for air? So air is so abundant that the price is forced down to zero. So, well, an exception is in downtown Tokyo, where the smog is so bad at times that sidewalk machines dispense oxygen in exchange for some yen at certain times. A lot of people are sick of the expression in terms of, well, that's this valuation business here. But in our examination of the stupid economy, we must look at what the terms of valuation are, namely money. Just what is it? An accurate but painful description is that it is a religion. And truly ecumenical, too, since virtually the whole human race has embraced it. More useful, however, is to ask what it is made of, or how solid it is, or where it is kept. Such a search is futile, because money is not a real thing, but merely a concept, a handshake, a promise to pay sometime in the future, when, as, and if. It should be obvious that money is based solely on faith and more closely resembles a verb, a way of acting towards something, rather than a noun, which is a something. Even more significant than the fact that money is not a thing, or even a zero, it is actually a negative. Yeah. Every dollar bill, check, CD, bond, credit card, etc., 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 signifies that something has not been paid for yet, and represents certificates or tokens that are owed to someone. This is the reason that these financial vehicles, including the dollars in our wallets, should be called debt tokens instead of money. Like all other religions, tons of print have been expended on describing, or more accurately, apologizing for the price system. The classic description is the Adam Smith model. And before we go into this, I must tell you that due to our time here, that this is going to be an economy model of the economy. So it's not going to be all that detailed. But we must go into this. And briefly stated, factories produce goods for a price. Workers receive wages, debt tokens that is, and give them up in exchange for those goods. Thus we have, in theory, a system where debt flows in a circle. Just like the song from that you heard on Broadway, I can't remember the show, it says, everybody's happy, everything is grand, just as long as the money changes hands. It's a wonderful song, I love it. Well, unfortunately, the theory breaks down in thousands of different ways in the real, not theoretical world. If someone takes some debt out of the circle to save for a rainy day, as we quaintly put it, that money is not available to purchase the goods. By the same token, if you'll forgive the pun, yeah, that's what I wrote. By this debt token, okay, you can laugh at it. How about what happens when the company takes out a profit? Okay. Another thing is, if a new person is born, do all the other members of society chip in a little so that little tad can have entrance to the circle and thereby live? What happens when factories, machines, and processes that produce new goods without any new labor? I mean, it screws up this circle somehow or other. And what happens to those who are unceremoniously dumped on the economic scrap heap for the same reason? All these interruptions and thousands more are normal and everyday consequences in the operation of a price system. There is nothing at all wrong. It's just the stupid economy. Well, how to keep such a Rube Goldberg contraption going was really not much of a problem. You see, it was and is handled very easily by merely inserting new debt into the circle. No problem at all. As we have already discussed, money is not a real thing. So there is no limit to how much we can print. It has no constraints in the physical world, since it's not in the physical world. Only the faith and credulity of the people pose any limit at all. Because that's what it is. It's just faith. And of course, everybody is doing it. We've all been roped into this. We sign home mortgage papers and order up hundreds of thousands of dollars to be printed in our name. Voila! More money in the circle. Okay. We elect political representatives to print hundreds of billions of dollars to purchase armaments for us. The result, of course, we emphasize that, is a huge and growing amount of public and private debt. Now, add to this the fact that all this new debt is loaned into the circle at compound interest rates. That means automatically that its rise has to be at an exponential rate, not just a linear rate, but as an exponential, a compound interest rate, as they say. And it is now zooming almost straight up towards the sky. Now, we should not be surprised, because increasing debt is an absolute requirement of the stupid economy. Another part of the economy involves the flow of goods and services. Now, this is the physical. That is a real flow. And it is opposite in direction in the same circle as the fiscal or the money flow. We hear it most often called the market. And usually with a reverence and the reverent tone in the voice. The market, the free market, as they sometimes say. How they can say that is beyond me when, well, you just take out the R and you know what they're really saying. The free market, the fee market. Now, some people call it a distribution system, but it is not and was never intended to be. Now, there's a reason for this, a fundamental reason, several of them, but one of the reasons is, I think it's basic, is that if something is produced in abundance, the price becomes dirt cheap and becomes lower, therefore, than the price of the wages and supplies to produce it. So who's going to continue this? Long before everyone in society has one of these things, no matter what it is, could be food even, the manufacturer is forced to quit making it. So much for a distribution system. The market protects itself. You see, that may be too bad. It's too bad. That's all you can say. But the first and foremost requirement of the market is to make money, not distribute things. You just can't do business when you have abundance. But we also, by the same token, must get over the notion that the industrialists are bad guys that want to build things that wear out, deliberately get us into wars, or pollute and pillage the planet. You see, the real boss is not them. It's the stupid economy. So what happens when this only limit on this business happens? The faith and credulity of the people is stretched so far that it snaps. When the debt creation on the stock market reached that point in 1929, we had what was called a crash. Everyone simply picked up their marbles and left the game. The fiscal circle was broken. Well, no harm done. After all, it was only money and made out of nothing, and it just went back where it came from. If we look at the real world, however, that's a different story. And there, if we examine it, nothing at all happened. Now think of it. There were no reports of smokestacks falling down. There were no reports of automobiles stopped running or machinery breaking, and no crops failed, no radio tubes burned out, nothing. And the real world happened. Nothing at all. We simply decided that if the money circle could not be maintained, by golly, we would stop the other circle from operating. That's it completely. Unfortunately, this other counterflowing circle is the food and shelter and goods and services whereby we live. It would seem as if the carpenters, the electricians, and plumbers all arrived at the building site one day and were told to go home. And they had all this stuff here, you know, no problem at all. But the person in charge apologized and informed them that they could not go on with the job because they had run out of inches. Simple as that. And everybody scratched their head and went home. Now, who was this person? Well, you guessed it. It was the stupid economy. And believe it or not, instead of being summarily fired, dismissed 60 years ago, this stupid economy is still in charge of everything. How can this be? Instead of recognizing the stupid economy's death and giving it a decent burial, the politicians called in the economic witch doctors to connect feeding tubes, potions, wires, and heart-lung machines to give the moribund system the appearance of life. One of the doctors, named Keynes, got the government to take over the debt-creating duties by hiring workers to do by hand what we had machines at that time that could do much better. The unfortunates at the bottom were thus readmitted to the circle at slave wages and spent every penny with the businessmen, who also wanted back into the loop. With WPA for the peasants, and RFC for the elite, and a whole panoply of alphabet soup nostrums, the cures worked beautifully, but only to stave off chaos and social revolt. The whole endeavor was a bust for the economy because not enough new debt could be created, and a whole decade went by with no improvement. 1941, by all the economic indicators, was just as bad as 1931. Everybody today concedes that only World War II brought us out of the Depression. The printed money stayed here. The war materials were shipped overseas, and all the bombs and all that stuff. Next, we had the Korean War. The Cold War with its hydrogen bombs, missiles, the missile race, and the ABMs. Then we had Vietnam, beautiful, limited war of unlimited duration. Wow. And in the 80s, the most gigantic buildup of arms and, guess what? Debt in history. The only mystery here is why anybody should be surprised at all this. The peace groups, the taxpayers, large and small, the unemployed, all want some change to occur, some reform of the economic system that will make everything rosy. Well, unfortunately, the economy is operating exactly in accordance with its rules. And every proposal that they offer will simply wreck the system. If peace broke out, it's pretty obvious it hasn't, what would happen to all the purchasing power of the jobs created in the huge arms business? Well, I don't know what it is, $300 billion or something like that. And remember Keynes from the 30s with the multiplier effect? It is now called military Keynesianism. And what would happen if the huge national debt, expected to reach $5 trillion next year, isn't that mind-boggling? What would happen if that was abolished or even reduced, as some clods have cried out for? Well, this would eliminate the holders of this debt and force them to leave the game, fatally rupturing the circle. It would make the '29 crash look like a Sunday school picnic. Well, what can we say about an economy that calls 6% unemployment normal? Throw these people on the economic trash heap, cut them out of the circle, and we call that normal? What can we say about that? Well, it is normal. And the reason for it is pretty doggone clear. Industry needs surplus labor to keep wages down. That's the economy, stupid. I mean, that's the stupid economy. Well, it's a natural function of this stupid economy. It's just a normal, natural thing. Now, that's the easy part, throwing them on the trash heap there. That's the easy part. But supplying just the right amount of jobs to keep the circle flowing is becoming increasingly difficult. I have a bumper sticker that states, if you think the system is working, ask somebody who isn't. Well, where are all these jobs that the leaders say we need going to come from? See, the only way that a majority of people, spite of all these ads for invest in the money markets and so forth. The majority of people can only gain access to the circle by selling their man hours. That is still true today. But manpower is needed less and less every day. 98% of all labor today is supplied by machines. We don't even use a hammer to drive nails anymore. We use nail guns. Pow! I mean, ridiculous. And now we have, even human beings used to push the buttons on the machines. Now we have given over the control of machines to computers. Bad news for employment. Millions of jobs were created in the so-called service industry to replace industrial automation job losses. But they are now being, that wonderful word, downsized. Where do they get these things from? Isn't that beautiful? Downsized. Doesn't mean you're fired forever. We've simply downsizing. Oh boy. And these are being, even these, the reason for this downsizing is because the new computer software that they have put in to handle these mountains and mountains and mountains in the so-called service industry are now beginning to work, really work, throwing hundreds of thousands of workers and their jobs, of course, in the trash can forever. The reinventing government guy, you know who that is? You know, let me take a look here for a second. You know who that reinventing government guy is? He is he's actually proud of the fact that they are eliminating 500,000 government jobs by next year. Isn't that mind-boggling? Now, no wonder they're talking about job retraining. Whatever. Boy, job retraining. But the fraud of job retraining is becoming clear to everyone. Retraining for what? Even the ordinary guy on the streets is beginning to see through that one. The most readily available career opportunity for our youth today is crime. That's it. Over 90% of all crime is for monetary gain. And it is frowned upon mostly because it does not generate new debt. Drugs, however, now that's another story. Like any other business, billions in money flow is generated. In addition, a multi-billion-dollar industry, a bureaucracy with tens of hundreds of thousands of jobs has grown up to combat it. God, what a tragedy for the stupid economy if they ever succeeded. Boy, the health insurance crisis is another normal and natural part of the stupid economy. Well, the fact of the matter is, nobody, I mean, nobody needs health insurance at all. Not at all. On the other hand, everyone needs health care. These racketeers have simply inveigled their way into this money circle between the consumer and the provider of health care, and they supply nothing except buying and selling most of the real estate in America. That's their function, their only function. And no one says that there's anything wrong with this, from the top guy on down. We've been fooled. See, these people are doing just what any business is supposed to do in a stupid economy. Well, then we can take our transportation system. The transportation system has been taken over by the automobile interest. We all know that. Ignoring for a moment the pollution, the deaths, the congestion, the waste, and everything, all this other stuff that goes with the automobile, we have to ask ourselves this question. Ask any businessman, which one would buy a machine? I'm serious. Consider this now. What businessman would buy a machine that sits idle for 96% of the time? Stupid. And I'm not going to say who's stupid, but in that case, but how have we suckered into doing this? You know, the method which we were suckered into doing this. And we're not stupid. I mean, we were truly subjected to a very, very prolonged, decades-long method. And this has all been very well documented. The auto, oil, and rubber companies first bought up and destroyed the rail lines that once crisscrossed all of our cities, all of our big cities in the past. And the bottom line of all this is, well, of course they pushed the automobile. I mean, that's the way it happened, you know, and they did billions of dollars worth of advertising, you know, everything from Dinah Shore, Tour of the USA, blah, blah, blah. Or the big M, you know, ladies and gentlemen, it's a really big shoe tonight. This is Ed Solomon, and see the Beatles stuff later on this week, and brought to you by the big M. Now, that's not the big M they talk about nowadays, but it's Mercury. But anyhow, that's the way they did it. And the bottom line of all this is that the automobile has been very, very good for the stupid economy. Wonderful. Well, considering all the above, and we have barely scratched the surface of the regular features of the price system, it should be obvious that nothing can be done to make this thing work any better than it is already. It is designed this way. What is needed is a totally new design to distribute the abundance of North America. This brand new design would place every person in North America, without exception, into the circle, with absolutely no restrictions. A guaranteed annual income, divorced from a job or any other provisions, will be provided as a right of citizenship in this design. Poverty, homelessness, crime, unemployment, welfare, and other ills would be instantly eliminated. Scarcity no longer exists in North America. So the artificial restrictions of the stupid economy are no longer valid. Instead of dividing up the not enough to go around, we have, for the first time in the 5,000-year history of the price system, the job of distributing an abundance. Now, it may come as a surprise, but the hardware for this distribution system is already largely installed. The UPC barcode and the laser scanners are already used virtually everywhere today to keep track of the flow of goods and services. President Bush showed his shocking technological ignorance by his discovery of it when he made a visit to a grocery store. But his design is not quite complete yet. All that remains to be done to make this into a distribution system is to replace the dollars with energy units, as advocated by Technocracy 50 years ago. The so-called leaders, however, are mired in the past price system thinking. Bush didn't know it at the time, but he accurately described it as voodoo economics. The physical world be damned. The important things are the national debt, the interest rates, the taxes, budgets, and the endless parade of fictions that constitutes the voodoo of the price system. All of this would be swept away if we install a smart economy instead of a stupid one. Now, we could go on with many more examples of the failures and inadequacies of the price system, and more reasons why it is increasingly out of control. And we could go into more detail of the solutions technocracy proposes, such as continentalism, a government by function and its many functional sequences, and much, much more. But we must stop and think about where we are at this point in time. We have arrived at an historic moment in human history. If we are really interested in social reform, we must look to the immediate future. At the present time, only technocracy has a proposal to organize our society for the technological age in which we now live. When, not if, the present society collapses, we must be individually prepared with the knowledge of how this future system works. Won't you start now by reading the magazines, the individual fact sheets called Technocracy Briefs, and go through this Technocracy study course. Even if you've been through it before, you should go through it again. If you agree, after a careful, even critical investigation of technocracy's analysis, now that's two things here, technocracy's analysis of the archaic price system and technocracy's synthesis of a brand new society called a TechNet, then please join Technocracy Incorporated in its efforts. Only by educating a sufficient number of North Americans of our possibilities here can we, as a species, prevent going the way of the dinosaurs. We have everything we need: the minerals, the water, a complete range of climate, and the largest pool of technologically capable people ever available. And now we have a design. We must get ready. The stupid economy is not long for this world. Thank you.
I'll give you a few moments to write out your questions from the notes you took. And I just wanted to mention one thing. Maybe you were aware that the latest Northwest Technocrat doesn't have a photograph on the cover this time. It just has a announcement of an article inside. But something that, of course, the average American who exposes himself to television endures constantly is it talks about foreign countries in which you're involved, particularly Somalia and so on. There's an article in the middle of this magazine called Somalia Hating No, and it gives you a little historical background about the involvement of the American price system in those areas and the background and how we got us in and the various players in the scenario there. It's something that you won't find in the average newspaper, and I think you'll enjoy it immensely. Also, in the back of this magazine is the very latest brief. It's called Population and Starvation. And it announces that at the very top, it says by mid-1993. Now, of course, you realize that's now history. The world's population reached 5.5 billion humans. And they go on then to talk about the implications of that. One of our members, Mr. Ken Bauman, has been involved in some radio work here recently, and I'd like to ask him to come up here for just a moment and share his recent experience with us. You would, Ken?
I don't, you can all hear me without the mic, can't you?
And the mic can too.
Okay.
The tape can.
And the tape can too.
And the tape can?
You're pretty loud.
Yeah, I know, I've been called a lot now. A few months ago, well, about a year ago, I've told some of you about this already, so you know the story. About a year ago, I started volunteering for a radio station that broadcasts exclusively to blind people. You have to have a special receiver to even receive the station. Well, last summer, while the guy was on vacation, I was asked to read the Time magazine for an hour, in addition to reading the newspaper that I read in the morning. So I read the Time magazine. When he returned from vacation, they asked me to read a magazine called The Economist. And I said, that's fine, I'll be glad to do it. We put these magazines on tape, by the way. And it's an hour-long session. I said, will it be all right if I read a little bit from the Technocracy magazines from time to time? And I gave him a copy to look over, and he said, yeah, it's all right, just don't read too much of it, just read a little of it. Well, I've been reading The Economist now for about 6 months, and periodically, not every week, but occasionally throwing in a little blurb from the magazine. About 2 weeks ago, the gentleman that runs the station said, we'd like you to quit reading The Economist altogether and give us an hour of technocracy literature if you can. And I said, great, I'll be glad to. I wanted to run up and grab the guy and hug him. But that's the story. So if anybody has any literature, any information they'd like to give me, I'd be more than happy to take anything. Thank you.
I think that may be the most encouraging thing I've heard in the last couple of months. And I had noticed, the reason I mentioned about this magazine is that these articles, you know, that relate to things that are on the television that people have in the back of their minds, even as much as they'd like to block it out, make a good introduction to people that of course, they really want to know, why are we over there in the first place? And a lot of them I was able to capture with the fact that, you know, there was an enormous oil reserves just off the coast there that a couple of large oil companies had gotten leases signed by Mr. Mohammed Adid's adversary, had signed these leases, and Mr. Adid had not. And of course that eventually led to their putting a price on his head, which by some miracle the man has managed to avoid getting himself assassinated by the United States Army. And now, in fact, I think they've thrown in the towel and decided that they can't assassinate this guy. I don't know what the oil companies are doing. The interesting thing would be to know whether or not Adid finally got the light and decided to sign leases with these same oil companies himself. I don't know. It would be interesting to know what the real scenario is there. And that, of course, is something we have not heard on the television. Okay, as you're still writing, so I'll stall for a few more minutes here. We, once again, Mr. John Tobby will be here on the 20th of March. It's a Sunday, of course. He'll be lecturing at 2 o'clock. I do not have the title of his lecture.
I'm going to turn this tape over because it's just about to end anyhow. And I like these question and answer period. I remember the first talk I gave, which hasn't been too long ago, and it's quite challenging.
Jim, you need the mic.
The first question and answer session I had, and I haven't had that many talks that I've given, and the very first one after the initial shock, I really enjoy this part because when you give a talk, you have to pick out what you think that people have in their heads already. Otherwise, you're talking Japanese to English-speaking people or vice versa. So you have to try to talk in terms of There's that word again. But you do have to use the terms that are common in your language when you're talking to other people, regardless of what the subject is. It's particularly difficult when you're dealing with the price system, because everyone, one of the reasons, everyone assumes that they know how the price system works. And when you investigate it, you find out that not one out of 100,000 knows how it really works. And so when you talk, you have to pick out as much as you can perceive of what people, more or less try to fill in the blanks for what people don't know about the price system. They assume certain things, like money is something, and that's what I took for the subject of this talk. And I've tried to shatter this this one part of it, and then of course the economy model of the economy, the Adam Smith circle. And there's much more that you can go into. Like, I didn't even talk about another measure of the economy, and that's the real world, and how technocracy intends to deal with that. And the way we deal with it now is what I dealt with today. So, let's take some of these questions here. All right, we have some all-inclusive questions here. Well, this is the easy one. What are our educators going to teach the unemployed new skills? What new skills can be developed when the production machines are already self-producing? Well, it was written under duress here. I can understand what the question is here. It's where are these new skills, and what will these new skills be? Because of the production machines that are already self-producing. That's very close to what is happening. What we have today is, you still hear a few whimpers about, quality control. We need skilled workers, because we've got to put in these highly intricate things, and we need skilled people to do this. And we hear that automation has done this and this and so forth, but we still need these skilled workers. Well, what has happened is that things turn out exactly the opposite of what you would guess. Like the authors of 1984, they said that Big Brother is going to watch over you, where they'd have these television things watching the people. Well, as it turned out exactly the opposite. What you did was to make the television so attractive that the people watched it. You see? But the effect was exactly the same, and even better, and very practical, because it takes a lot less software, very few people have to run the thing, and you can get people to think exactly, and you get them to willingly participate in their own brainwashing, which of course we find out is the only way brainwashing works, when you willingly give up your mind. And so the skilled workmanship, see, is another area where things turn out exactly the opposite. Instead of having skilled workers put something together, you made the product and designed it in such a way that it just snaps together, and you didn't even have to know how to use a screwdriver. Out the window goes all the skilled workers involved with that process. And now we have just a very, very few people designing a machine with what they have CAD and CAM, they call them. It's just computer-aided machines and computer-aided design, and I don't know how many, and all of these drawing processes. They're all and a few people, a few smart cookies, can design castings and everything that make these things out of plastic or whatever material, so that as it comes along, the parts just go snap in. So you can ship the job to Mexico, where you have people that don't even have to speak any language, let alone English, and they can sit there and they can just put these things, together. And if even that is needed to be done. So so that's the answer to this question. That's the new skills. I think they call it downsizing. So it simply is not possible that when you have more and more things doing less and less, more and more production with less and less people. I wish I had trimmed. I was in the paper yesterday about how the productivity, the little burst they're talking about. Oh, we're recovering from the economy. But it was an increase in productivity, and it was attained by firing, I think, something like 100,000. I don't know how, just an astounding number of people. And at the same time last year, or within the 4 months or something like that, production increased. I mean, everybody should be able to see this, that retraining is a fraud, and the new skills need to be developed. And those new skills, only Technocracy offers. Only Technocracy. Because Technocracy proposes to have an education system that will train people how to live rather than earn a living. And that's what we need desperately, as the recent break-in here illustrates, as all the crime and all this stuff that's going on. I mean, you got a bunch of millions upon millions of young, healthy, energetic teenagers, and don't give them something to do. It's a recipe for disaster. They didn't have any in previous to our present price system economy, which is about 5,000 years old. They didn't have such a thing as juvenile delinquency. The reason for that was that there were no juveniles. You were either a child or an adult, and they had a ceremony centered around puberty or somewhere in that area, and they were given some kind of a reminder, a very physical, painful reminder that you were not a child anymore. And from then on, you were an adult and you went by the adult rules. We have in our wonderful society, the price system society, chucked all that aside, and we are suffering the consequences for it. We must design a society for people rather than the market and all these other things. So, we do need new skills, and we are sadly, we have never ever has there been a people in the history of the world so unprepared for their future. There has never been anyone ever, no society ever has been so unprepared. We have a situation where when we came to this country 400 years ago and took over this land, we had a society where these people knew everything. Their education system involved teaching their children everything that they needed to know. They knew how to make the stone axes. They knew how to survive by themselves in the wilderness. They could, I mean, we know the winter we're having this year, and they actually lived and prospered during that time. So, we are just not prepared for the time that we live in, let alone the future. So our educators have a big job. We must teach people how to live rather than making a living. Now the question here. What about income for illegal immigrants? Well, with a, it says in parenthesis, in a technate. A technate involves, for quite a few reasons, the whole continent of North America and a little portion of South America. And this is the minimum area needed, on the one hand, for a society technologically run that will support its population in the highest fashion possible. And it's the maximum, it's also, did I say minimum or maximum? That's the minimum size. It's also an area that could be defended from all the rest of the tribes on the earth. And we could have, of course, anybody should know that our biggest arm of our Defense Department should be the Coast Guard. But we'll have to do a little thinking about that. All those things go along with the concept that technocracy has invented called continentalism. Now this is to chuck in the ash can of history the relatively new concept of nationalism. Nationalism hasn't been around all that long. The tribal system of Africa, for instance, the white man's juju of nationalism was more powerful than the local tribesman's juju of throwing the bones on the ground there and say, "Oh, we got to fight them short people over there." So, but at least they had to go over a mountain or over a river or something. They had to go to some physically different place in order to make trouble and for each other. And they had their methods of struggling and surviving and doing quite well, thank you, until the white men, the white Europeans in the mid-1800s decided, no, they're going to take a sample from us. They're going to have nationalism, even though they had 100 years wars and they had horrible things as a result of nationalism in Europe. They called themselves civilized. We're going to civilize those blacks down in Africa. So they decided, they just drew these lines, you know, and they drew them right for their various purposes, minerals and other things that are not connected to the real world. So they decided to impose nationalism on, and you can open the paper today and see the results that have been going on continuously from when we first sliced up. Our predecessors in Europe sliced up the continent of Africa, and we, of course, did the same thing. We carried that over to the North American continent and wiped out the tribalism that was there. And we're seeing the last whimpers of resistance right now from southern Mexico. And these people are very there's Indian people there saying, "Hey, we are of the land, and we think we belong to the land rather than the land belonging to us." And we call them those nasty. They got those communist ideas. How they got that 1,000 years ago, I don't know, but it was before Marx. But maybe Marx got it from them. I don't know. Anyhow, they had this complete different idea of how they related to the earth, and the white man came along, and he had the opposite. So naturally, there was this conflict that's been going on since then. So we've got to eliminate that and so this renders a whole new meaning to this word immigrants, and also the illegal part of it. It's like an illegitimate child. How can a child be illegitimate? I mean, it's a real child. and how can an immigrant be illegal? Well, it's only because we say so. That's the only basis in the real world that it rests on, is because we say it so. And And as far as immigrant goes, there would be no immigrants in a technate unless they swam. It'd be very, very simple. Unless the ice age comes and there's a land bridge across the Bering Sea, no problem. How would you take care of this as far as the accounting for this national distribution system? Since we have more than enough to go around, we just simply distribute everything to anybody that lives in North America as a matter of citizenship. We obviously have to protect ourselves from kooks and outside agitators, as they call them, from foreign places that might be sent over here. Now, one way to combat this from large-scale tasks, of course, is to invite over not immigrants but students. Pay their their upkeep and everything in physical terms, of course. Support them, give them an education in how the TechNet of North America operates, and tell them everything they want on the proviso that they go back home afterwards. And these would be temporary immigrants, I guess you would call them, not illegal, but temporary. And of course they would have, while they were here, able to participate in any movies they wanted to go to, any yacht they wanted to sail on, any car they wanted to drive, any thing that we have here in North America, they would be able to participate in this as a right of citizenship like anybody. They would have their green card, I guess you would call it, and just along with all the rest of the citizens. However, it would expire, as every person's green card would, or income card, as we call it, the energy certificate, would expire in 2 years' time and be issued another one. They would get a letter and said, "Your time's up, go home." And so these immigrants would be held. Now there's other immigrants, anybody that had criminal tendencies, psychotic or otherwise, in this country would be able to be, the only way they'd be able to eat, travel, buy clothes, get shelter, would be through an energy certificate. And any person in North America who is living here would want to know that in their midst is an enemy. And anybody in North America that is not trying to hide something, who is not one of the enemies, would want their relatives to know if they fell down a mine shaft someplace, or were abducted, or anything at all happened to them. They would be able to say, well, let's find out where this person, we got 200 million people here, and that's a big job. Well, okay, we'll run a tracer on them, and we'll just find out where the last place they purchased a meal, or where they slept, or whatever. And a person would be able to be kept track of if it was necessary. And of course, nobody, in the present time, of course, that is anathema. I mean, you absolutely, people go bananas. Oh, Big Brother. Why not? Because everybody in North America, by the requirements of the stupid economy, is a criminal. You have to extract debt against your fellow man faster than he can pile up debt against you, and on and on and on. You are victimized from morning to night by either an employer, or you are the employer. You victimize your employees. It's the rules of the game. There's nothing bad about it. It's just the way things are. We think in terms of scarcity.